When Jesus reminded the apostles of the Great Commission before his ascension, he told them that they were to be his witnesses both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and even to the remotest part of the earth, in Acts 1 and verse 8. So far in our study of the book of Acts, we've seen the church established in Jerusalem and the message of the gospel moving from there into the rest of Judea and then also Samaria. However, Jesus' plan for them to go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation, as he gave in the Great Commission in Mark 16:15, that would require them to eventually preach to those who were not their fellow Jews. In other words, preach to the Gentiles. However, many Jewish Christians were slow to realize this. Even Peter, who would preach to the first Gentile convert, had to receive a vision from God in order to be convinced to visit a Gentile and preach to him. This chapter describes Peter visiting the home of a Gentile, preaching the gospel to him, and then this man and his household being converted to Christ. So we'll start reading in Acts chapter 10 and verse 1. Now there was a man at Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian cohort, a devout man and one who feared God with all his household, and gave many alms to the Jewish people and prayed to God continually. About the 9th hour of the day he clearly saw in a vision an angel of God who had just come in and said to him, Cornelius, and fixing his gaze on him, and being much alarmed, he said, What is it, Lord? And he said to him, Your prayers and alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now dispatch some men to Joppa and send for a man named Simon, who is also called Peter. He is staying with a tanner named Simon, whose house is by the sea. When the angel who was speaking to him had left, he summoned 2 of his servants and a devout soldier of those who were his personal attendants, and after he had explained everything to them, he sent them to Joppa. So this chapter tells us about a man named Cornelius. As far as his occupation, he was a centurion in the Roman army in the division that was called the Italian cohort. Attaining to this position implied certain things about his character, that he was diligent, serious, worthy of respect. Yet there are other character traits that Luke mentioned that are particularly significant for the events that will unfold in this chapter. Cornelius was described as devout, which means he was reverent or pious. He also feared God with all his household and gave many alms to the Jewish people and prayed to God continually. So his piety and religious devotion was not directed toward the idols that his fellow Gentiles typically worshipped. At some point, he learned about the God of heaven, wanted to honor him, and took it upon himself to try to help the people of God. At this time, he was located in Caesarea, a city which sat on the Mediterranean coast a little north of Judea. Incidentally, there was another preacher who was located in Caesarea at this time, a man named Philip. We talked about him in Acts chapter 8. In verse 40 of that chapter, it says that he went to Caesarea. However, the Lord was going to send someone else to Cornelius. He was going to send an apostle to him, in particular, Peter. So an angel appeared to Cornelius one afternoon, and understandably, he was startled by the vision. But the angel told him, Your prayers and alms have ascended as a memorial before God. The Lord clearly took notice of the character and good deeds of this man who was a Gentile. So the angel told him to send some men to Joppa, which was 30 or 40 miles south of Caesarea, and find Peter. The angel even told him where Peter could be found. He was going to be at the house of Simon the tanner, whose house was by the sea. This is where Peter was at the end of the previous chapter, as we saw at the end of chapter 9. After the vision, Cornelius immediately summoned 2 of his servants and 1 of his soldiers to accompany them. He explained everything to them and sent them to Joppa in order to find Peter. So we continue in verse 9. On the next day, as they were on their way and approaching the city, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour to pray. But he became hungry and was desiring to eat. But while they were making preparations, he fell into a trance. And he saw the sky opened up, and an object like a great sheet coming down, lowered by 4 corners to the ground. And there were in it all kinds of 4-footed animals and crawling creatures of the earth and birds of the air. A voice came to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything unholy and unclean." Again a voice came to him a second time, "What God has cleansed, no longer consider unholy." This happened 3 times, and immediately the object was taken up into the sky. So while the men from Cornelius were on their way to Joppa, Peter was praying on the housetop at about the 6th hour, which was midday. And while he was waiting for the ones in the house to prepare a meal, it says he fell into a trance where he would see a vision from God. The text describes this vision as a great sheet coming down from the sky and being lowered to the ground. On the sheet were all kinds of 4-footed animals and crawling creatures and birds. And a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Now Peter objected to this because he said that he had never eaten anything that was unholy or unclean, referring to the dietary laws that were given under the law of Moses. The voice responded, "What God has cleansed, no longer consider unholy." And the text says this happened 3 times while Peter was up there on the housetop. So then verse 17. Now while Peter was greatly perplexed in mind as to what the vision which he had seen might be, behold, the men who had been sent by Cornelius, having asked directions for Simon's house, appeared at the gate. And calling out, they were asking whether Simon, who was also called Peter, was staying there. While Peter was reflecting on the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Behold, 3 men are looking for you. But get up, go downstairs, and accompany them without misgivings, for I have sent them myself." Peter went down to the men and said, "Behold, I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for which you have come?" They said, "Cornelius, a centurion, a righteous and God-fearing man, well spoken of by the entire nation of the Jews, was divinely directed by a holy angel to send for you, to come to his house and hear a message from you." So he invited them in and gave them lodging, and on the next day he got up and went away with them, and some of the brethren from Joppa accompanied him. So it says here that Peter was greatly perplexed by the vision as he first had received it. The meaning would be clear to him later, but at this point he did not understand what this meant. So while he was contemplating what this could possibly mean, the men who were sent by Cornelius arrived at the gate and asked for Peter. Now the Spirit came to Peter and told him that the 3 men were there looking for him and that he should go down and meet them and then accompany them without misgivings, because the Spirit himself had sent them. So when Peter went down, he asked the men why they had come. And they explained that they were sent by Cornelius, who was a centurion, but also one who was righteous, God-fearing, and well spoken of by the Jews. They also told Peter that Cornelius was instructed by an angel to send for Peter, so that he could come to his house and Cornelius could hear a message from him. And we don't know for sure how Peter might have responded if the Spirit had not already instructed him to meet and accompany these men. However, given what he said later when he got to the house of Cornelius, in verse 28, that it was unlawful for a Jew to associate with a foreigner or to visit him, given what he said there, it's unlikely that he would have gone with them if the Spirit had not told him to. But since he received his previous instruction from the Spirit, he welcomed them in and went with them the next day. However, the text also says that some of the brethren from Joppa, who were Jewish Christians, also accompanied him to Caesarea. This is going to be important because they would serve as witnesses for the things that were going to happen at the house of Cornelius with the gospel being preached to him, and then, as we're going to see at the end of this chapter, the conversion of Cornelius and his household.